Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 2 of 2. We're covering Alien, the Ridley Scott film from 1979. Here we go. The most recent time, did you watch the director's cut or the original theatrical release?
I don't really know what the difference is.
So there are a few differences, and this is an interesting, like when it sort of gets into the territory of nerd culture and retconning and all that. One very specific difference that changes a lot is that the director's cut, which Ridley Scott admits he did for money, and he doesn't, he likes the theatrical version better. There is a scene where the captain, the guy with the beard, he is ostensibly killed first after the chest burster scene. He wasn't actually killed. He gets dragged off and is put into one of those, into the sort of like wall webbing.
Oh, yeah.
things.
They turn him into an egg or something like that.
They turn him into a potential host, you know, and he's like, kill me. And they do, which changes everything. Right? Because then the monster isn't just slaughtering everybody on the ship. It actually somehow went and fetched a bunch of eggs or is able to lay them and then create all this web work on the walls to imprison people by itself. It just kind of confuses things. And it being excised, I think, makes the film a lot cleaner.
I did not see that version.
Yeah.
Tom Skerritt just dies in it.
Yeah.
And I think even with when you consider the broader franchise that, okay, this is not a queen alien.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that's introduced later. In nature, you see creatures sort of like, you know, like frogs change sexes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like some animals in the absence of like a mate will just create another egg that's just only their chromosomes. They're basically cloning themselves.
Yeah.
I don't think that's like that controversial for this.
Right, but considering we end up seeing a queen, it's a completely different beast. And there's a whole process.
Yeah, and I would say that...
And it happens in like hours.
I would say this film just has its own rules in the later films. And this is something about the Alien franchise as a whole. I would say probably on film, my favorite sci-fi franchise of all time. I love Giger's designs. The first time I ever saw him, I remember the first time I saw him in this movie first, but the first time I ever saw them in person was they had his books at Tower Records in the French Quarter, and I would go all the time and look at them. And I could never afford them. They were so expensive. Now they're really expensive. Again, I was going to buy a copy of the Necronomicon. It's like $400.
What? I used to have that.
Me too. I had all that shit.
Damn.
The number of books I look up that I want now that I used to have that are sort of... I guess the sort of stuff that if you were in industrial music in the 90s that you would have on your bookshelf, all that shit is expensive. Like all those research books, crazy expensive. A bunch of small press occult stuff I had, insanely expensive.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I wish I still had all that stuff. But that's how you know you're poor, when you've sold all of your things a bunch of times in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Like I was talking to my wife about this, and I was thinking about it with this movie because there was a time when I hadn't gone to Berkeley yet, but I was probably going to transfer there from City College, but I'm still bartending at night, farmers markets in the morning, school full time, just grind. My friend Gene, who I mentioned earlier, comes back and he's like, "What have you been doing?" "I drive trucks in Iraq." "What? Like, how is that as an option?" And he's making like hundreds of $1,000s a year, tax free, like over there. Everything's paid for while you're over there. So it's pretty much, you're just like not paying anything. I wanted to do that so bad. And my wife was like so not into it.
Yeah.
Sucks. I would go back and do that in a second. Because at the time, I'm just like selling clothes. Like, it's like are you in a
as someone who's watched about maybe 20 GWAT films in the last 2 weeks. Don't do that.
Oh man. I don't know that I wouldn't consider it in the future.
Oh God.
Because I just think about his situation, probably like these people in the film. He went over there for like 4 or 5 years, moved up really quickly, did not fuck up over there. A lot of people fuck up over there and they get sent back and they lose their money. Like you get caught with like porn or whiskey or whatever you're not supposed to have in these Muslim countries. And you would get bonuses if you made it the whole way. And so he was just stacking money and he's effectively retired. But his shit got shot up all the time. Like it was very traumatic for him, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't believe in therapy. So you would just be fucked.
I believe in crying myself to sleep with my huge pile of money.
What are your thoughts on extraterrestrials? What's your position?
My position on it is I don't think anything that anyone has ever, like the more I read about UFOs, the less I believe in them.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Like, and I have like, actually a friend of mine, Brian Thies, who worked on the Alien versus Predator comics. He's like a pretty talented artist. He's the only person I know who I do not think is a moron that has seen unidentified flying object or a UAP or whatever they call him now. And he's quite convinced that he's seen it. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I think that there might be some sort of like mystical or psychological phenomenon that is present in people that makes them see these things. Like, you know, the chariots of the gods, fire in the sky sort of thing, where it's like they're describing these things in biblical stories or old stories of gods. Like maybe there is something, but just based on the physics of it, I'm kind of on the Fermi paradox spectrum of this, in that like we're just in a giant graveyard and we might be it.
Yes.
What about you?
When I read people who've walked out compelling theories of why we might not be alone, it's pretty compelling arguments.
Yeah.
But when I spend time with content produced by believers,
it's nonsense.
It's just homeopathy. It just makes no sense to me that people would believe it. That there's just, to me, it's just flat eartherdom.
I totally agree. I mean, I've watched, in the 90s, UFOs were totally a thing because of X-Files and all that stuff. And even back then, I liked it as like a countercultural thing, and I liked sci-fi. So obviously you're thinking, but the more I learned about physics and actual space flight and stuff, it just seems not at all likely. Or if it is, it's going to be something. I think it would be more like the xenomorph than it would be like a Vulcan.
Yeah.
And I think it's probable like three bodies problem sort of situation where you don't want it coming here.
Yes. And I think I forwarded you that recent Yasha Monk. I don't know why he wrote this article, but
I don't know either, because like the rest of his
so
article,
off the beaten path for him.
And it's also not good. It's like a rehash of like a bunch of like really tropey. It reads like a BuzzFeed article, which is weird for him. It's like, if you don't know any of that stuff, it probably seems very insightful, but it's like, it's really like the greatest hits of these statements.
Sure. But for our listeners, the basic premise of it, I think even the title of the article is "Please Stop Telling Aliens to Come Visit" or whatever. And his point is, I think this movie is proven by this movie, like, and Three Body Problem, like the chances of there being something out there and it not being malicious is like, it's more probably harmful in some way than not.
There's definitely not like big titty aliens you want to fuck out there.
It's not Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's my version of what you just said.
Yeah. I always thought the episode of Star Trek, the Crystalline Entity episode, was to me the most, it's just this thing made out of crystals floating in space, and it sort of has a vague intelligence, and it's able to sort of connect with one person on the ship, I think, if I remember it correctly. I think it would be probably like that. You're like, this chromatic based organism that you have no real chance of even interacting with. That's more likely. I mean, I know that as they find more and more water out in the universe, it seems more and more likely that, hey, there could have been something. But I mean, it could be the case that the last intelligent life form other than us went extinct millions of years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. It's weird shit.
Oh, well.
I definitely don't think it's like how it was in Prometheus or Covenant. I think those films are like, the ideas behind them are fucking terrible.
They're garbage
I think
movies.
They're like, okay, there's good, they look cool. There's like good acting in them. They're like competently made films, but just the idea of the engineers, I think the more they articulate about the universe of this film, the worse it gets.
The more that it's just Phantom Menace, and it's with a dash of the Jar Jar Binks factor.
I think even as great as Aliens is, and we'll get into this if we do the Aliens episode, as fun as that movie is, I think what it adds to the mythos takes away from the horror of the first film.
Interesting.
Because you could ultimately just nuke that planet from orbit. The next people who come around, provided they're not Weyland-Yutani trying to capture the shit, they would just be like, fuck this whole planet. Hadley's Hope. See you later.
Yeah.
And that's the end of that threat.
Yeah.
But in the original script for those Covenant Prometheus movies, the idea was that the engineers had created humans and they went off. And this is where it gets so weird, is it gets really muddy. Like when they try to be intentional with the mythology, it gets really stupid. Like that the main character, Rumi Rapis, or whatever her name is.
Rumi Rapace.
Yeah.
Rumi Rapace, sorry.
Her character is like explicitly Christian in the film, and she never stops being faithful, even at the point of like seeing the engineers. Like, guys, talk about like throwing cold water on your religion. You were literally created by these aliens from goo. Like, that's it, bummer. But there was this idea that the engineers had observed humans from afar and did not like how warlike they were becoming, so they sent an alien who was Jesus, and then the humans crucified that character, and then they were like wrote off human. It's just so fucking dumb. Like, it doesn't work a million different ways. It's totally stupid.
Yeah.
It's like
we're gonna cover them. I'm gonna insist on it.
I don't even want to talk about it. I don't know. They're just bad. And the fact that like Ridley Scott did those movies, like,
it's baffling.
I don't understand it.
Yep.
Yeah. I think as a whole, they're mostly bad.
Well, speaking about legacy and the retcon and all that, something I like about this movie is that, as far as I can tell, there's nothing intertextual about it. It doesn't refer to anything outside of itself. It's a completely self-contained world and universe, even though it definitely borrowed or stole from other movies. It doesn't reference them.
Well, where are you drawing the line on intertextuality? Are you like meaning like somebody mentions that guy from Krypton and it's like a wink to Superman's in-universe?
That's the grossest version, yes.
Or the fact that the ships are the Narcissus and the Nostromo, and that's connected to Conrad. Like, because that's intertextual too.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess
depends
maybe
on where you're drawing that.
Yeah. I guess no. You know what? I'm going to confess that I'm probably coming at it with such an elitist.
Xenomorphs are also Egyptian, allegedly. The
right, but they're not called xenomorphs in
this. But yeah.
But I guess because it was a reference to literature, not pop culture, it was invisible to me.
And it also might be the most offensively intertextual franchise of all time, if you consider the Alien versus Predator.
Well, okay, that's that's different. But I meant this movie. I'm really talking about this movie when I said that. It goes off the rails, but this movie is so self-contained. But fair enough.
I don't even think Weyland-Yutani is mentioned in this. It's just the company. Like I don't think they mention.
I don't remember
the name of the company. I don't think they do. I do enjoy how Weyland-Yutani gets walked out a little bit in the broader universe. Like the fact that it is just this complete and total $1 trillion company. It's like the first $1 trillion company. And you realize, I think that's interesting. It's like this idea that if you did let a company get that big, that's exactly what it would do. Like imagine Elon Musk's Weyland-Yutani. Like he's going to bring that fucking alien back here just to play with it.
Of course.
Like a total a-hole would.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you were to pick a CEO of Weyland-Yutani to run it for real, like you can't say Charlie XCXE or whatever.
I don't know who that is.
Who would you think would be a good CEO for Weyland-Yutani?
Like a legitimately competent.
Yeah. Like if you worked for Weyland-Yutani, who do you want to be the CEO?
I love that question, but I genuinely have no answer.
Okay, so you have drawn a blank on the CEO. That's where
I think I can't think of powerful people that I think of as competent not to make shitty decisions that would destroy humanity. Like I genuinely can't think of any.
Yeah, it's pretty tough to think of something. I think about this a lot, like with the election cycle coming up. Obviously I'm kind of like thumbs down on both of our candidates. And I think both the vice presidents are fucking clown shows. Even though I did like Hillbilly Elegy as a book quite a bit because I just share a lot of those experiences with that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was trying to think of it. It's like in my mind, I want like a Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec to be the president, just sort of a nerd who does the right thing.
Wow, of all the Parks and Rec characters you could have mentioned, I'm
to be
shocked.
President? Oh, I think so. For me, I mostly want the government. In a way, it's like I want the Ron Swanson goal.
That's what I was.
But you wouldn't make Ron Swanson the president because he wouldn't be he's more like the ideal. Like he's the kind of citizen that doesn't need a president. That's what you want in life. That's what you want to be.
Right.
But I think he would probably, obviously he's friends with Leslie Knope, and Leslie Knope or Ben Wyatt becomes president in the show. Like it's unclear who, which I think is sweet but dodging. But somebody like him, just a nerd. Somebody who's like, the numbers pencil out, pretty decent, that's what I want in the government, is I don't want to think about it at all. I want to think about the government as a whole the way I think about the Parks and Rec, like the actual real parks department in America. They do a pretty good job. They make a cool t-shirt every once in a while. You don't usually think about them. Yeah,
but is the character of government determined by the person who's in charge, or is it determined by the culture that fosters the person that's in charge?
Oh, it's the fucking culture. That's why we have these turds that we have now. We deserve what we have.
Yeah.
Like what we have a choice of makes total sense to me. If you were looking from the outside in, you'd be like, oh yeah, this checks out. Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody who would be capable of running Weyland,
you would have to be like ruthless.
How do you pronounce it?
Weyland-Yutani.
Weyland-Yutani. Well, okay. Regardless of whether they'd have to be ruthless, actually, no, I think maybe you were about to get into the thing I was thinking, which is that like the type of, let's say, CEO of that company that would be invested in bringing back xenomorphs from another planet as a bioweapon or whatever, it might be that there's no way for that person to exist.
Yeah.
Because if you're working for that company, that is what you're going to do. There's a company that is like 1,000 times more powerful than Amazon is not going to pass on a chance to bring xenomorphs back to Earth. Yeah.
One thing that's always been a little dodgy to me in the broader mythos of this franchise is, so Weyland-Yutani's obviously the most powerful company in the universe. What does the government look like? It's never like totally clear. Like, are they the government? Like, did they just privatize everything and took it over? Like, you would think that's probably how it works. Especially, they have draconian labor laws. Like, you lose all your money if you don't go pick up the space nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, so that seems pretty fucked up. And so then, and they have not run into aliens before, so there's not an extraterrestrial threat that they're retconned. You're sort of aware of what happens. But as of this film, who is this like biological weapon to be used against? Like that is like, who is it? Earth?
SpaceX.
You can't. Yeah, there's some other like startup space mining company out there that just try to wreck. Yeah. I was thinking like they have colonies. Weyland-Yutani has colonies in space. There's never any mention of like the United States space colony. As far as I know, there's no ships in the series that are national in origin. They're all part of this. Like, is it just to shut down rebellions on planets? Is that what it's for? You drop it on the world, the Alien 3 world and kill all those guys off, or
sure.
Yeah, I don't know. But they probably just think they can like get something useful out of it, like the spiders in Brazil that they use for boner pills.
What? Is that a thing?
Yeah. There's this spider that in Brazil that if it bites you, you get like a painful erection for like 3 days, and you can actually have heart attacks and stuff.
This is real?
Yeah, it's a real spider. It's a Brazilian boner spider. I don't know what it's actually called, but that's what I've known it as. But
never heard of this.
But it was studied by pharmacies or by pharmacy companies to create boner drugs.
God damn it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at a note. You know, I've got this sort of template for when I watch horror movies, these things. And one of the questions I always ask myself about whatever's evil in a horror movie is the question of, does it scale? I love how the answer to that question is just a screaming yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, actually, the entire franchise spins out from how much the evil can scale in this context.
It gets quite evil. It's funny, too, though, to think about that people would probably try to turn the xenomorph into boner pills.
Well, what is essential about what it does that could be used for an alternate purpose?
Well, so if we're into the whole like bioengineering sort of thought process of it, its skin is acid resistant. So whatever it's made out of is not burned by its corrosive material. So you got right there's something.
Yeah.
They make materials out of spider silk, so it's obviously able to lacquer ships with the xenomorph stuff. So that's probably something that you could do. It's like essentially like maybe some sort of biological 3D printer.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Something else that comes from the director's cut versus the theatrical cut, and I might be getting this slightly wrong, is that if the xenomorph is alone and not trying to like lay eggs and capture, we would assume that it increases in size so quickly because it's killing or something. Although it jumps in size from the chest burster to near its final size pretty quickly, which means there's something about it that can engineer growth.
Yeah, some sort of like weird rapid cell division.
Yeah.
Sort of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking bitchin'. That's another one. I always wondered, like, this isn't really, maybe it is explored in the comics, but, is it like ant colonies? Like if you mixed xenomorphs from different areas, would they become subservient to whatever the toughest queen was, or would they just fight each other?
Oh, it'd be like dog fighting.
Yeah,
xenomorph
dog fight xenomorphs. That would be pretty tough.
That's good.
I think there might even be, I feel like I've seen an image of a predator having a xenomorph on a chain, maybe. Like if I'm remembering that correctly. Because that's in the extended universe, that's the whole deal, is that the reason why they're all over the place is that the predators are total dickheads and just will drop them on a planet and just go try to hunt them. And if they do not succeed in the hunt, the whole planet is fucked.
That's dark.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing that just looking at my notes, another aspect to when I was saying it's not intertextual, which you proved me wrong, but I also like to think about the way in which The Walking Dead calls zombies walkers, because for some reason in that universe they don't use the word zombies.
Yeah.
Which is weird, but fine. In this movie, there's something that I kind of love, that they have no point of reference for what's happening. They don't know what it is, of course. Yeah. That's part of it. But they don't even have a point of reference. Like, not only have they never seen anything like it, you get the feeling none of these characters ever knew there was anything other than humans from planet Earth flying around.
Yeah.
So they're not even like that dangerous alien thing. Like, there's just no way to reference it. It is so, and in a sense that makes it Lovecraftian, even though we watch it and we're like, that's an alien.
Yeah.
It's an alien and it's killing them. The characters in this movie, this is just this violent presence. And there's no name for it. There's no understanding of what it wants, what its objective is. All they know is that it's likely that they're all going to die.
I mean, that's totally the Mountains of Madness reference to this.
Yep.
I think that it's pretty much when Prometheus came out, I think Guillermo del Toro had a version of In the Mountains of Madness pretty deep in production, and he just shelved it because he's like, this is kind of the same movie. But I love that story. That story is so cool, and it's really exactly this movie. The fact that there's unanswered stuff in the background is so cool. Like, just stuff like, how long has this ship been here? Totally interesting. The space jockey is fossilized. So clearly tens of thousands of years. You know what? Like, this is super interesting. And what is the weird laser field that they
totally, and also the what is the nickname for that pilot?
Space jockey.
Space jockey.
Yeah.
Thank you. The space jockey is fossilized, but the eggs are like moving.
Right, but is it because of the containment field of the ship? Is it like a refrigerator
Right.
that's happening, or is that just something that like the eggs have adapted for? Like, just sort of, seeds on Earth live for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
You can germinate old ass seed. It's really interesting. Right. To me, that all the unanswered stuff is what makes this movie so great. The multiple levels of stuff that the characters would have to deal with. Like, first of all, there's aliens. Like, that wasn't a thing before we landed here. And then not only is there seems to be different kinds of aliens. And like, what is that? And like this, just the sight of that weird round ship, it's actually exactly how the architecture is described of the city that they find in the H.P. Lovecraft story. It's just like non-Euclidean geometry is kind of how they describe it, which I think obviously that's like a thing that can't exist, but the shape of the ship being just so weird and just how it's lopsided. I mean, it's just so neat.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that makes Ridley Scott such a great director is the things that we really think of when we see this movie. They were all fought by the studio. The studio did not want the space jockey thing. There was just so much they didn't want that we think of as the most important aspects of this film. They didn't want Giger's creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was really trying to think of other examples in cinema history, at least at a certain scale, like large Hollywood films, that are such a reflection of an artist who is not the director's vision. Mm-hmm. So I don't blame this movie on Giger. I think that this is just like, you brought up Led Zeppelin, but like the thing about Led Zeppelin is it's 4 fucking incredible musicians who have sort of nothing in common musically, doing something where they come together with the synchronicity that's undeniable. And this movie is like that too, right? You have these incredible artists who bring very different things to the table, and it all works somehow. And one very singular aspect to that is H.R. Giger has such this unique aesthetic. I can't think of other examples in Hollywood history where a film is so dictated by one artist.
Yeah. I mean, right? It really is. You could certainly make arguments of other films. I'm sure that they're out there.
I just can't think of any.
Yeah. But I mean, and also just like an artist of such cultural importance. I mean, think about how many biomechanical tattoos you saw in the late 90s.
Yes.
Like just that people would choose to put those images on themselves. And also just the general response to it. I remember if you had asked me in 1995 or 96 who my favorite artist was, visual artist, I would have probably said H.R. Giger. And mostly because I would not have learned about Francis Bacon yet, right. So who eventually becomes my favorite painter. But I really distinctly remember talking to some art girl that I was probably trying to impress, and she's like, well, what artist do you like? And I was like, H.R. Giger, obviously, he's the fucking coolest, man. And she was just
you did not get laid that night.
I probably did, but like, but I just remember the look on her face was like, probably how if I went to somebody's house and they had a bunch of Funko Pops, and I would just be like, ugh.
Right.
Just, ugh. Just that was her look. And I remember at the time, like that moment really kind of made, I don't know. I felt like in some ways, like I was like cowed by it. And I was like, oh, I'm lame. I kind of felt the same way like when we, after we were like just jerking off the Joker movie for 2 hours with Daniel Kaufman. And then I've talked about this before, but then I go listen to Red Scare shit all over it. I'm like, oh, maybe I am lame. There's something like about a pretty girl hating on something that you like that is just so demoralizing. But when I went back at it, I'm like, man, this dude's like from a technical standpoint, like what? You don't like that he uses a fucking airbrush? Is that like too Lisa Frank for you? Like, to me, like the technical detail of these paintings, the subject matter of them is absolutely disturbing and unlike anything else. His use of different media is totally original and cool.
It's interesting watching some of the making of this film where, you can tell by looking at H.R. Giger's paintings that he's incredibly skilled at doing that thing. But then watching him sort of like wield plasticine as he's building these 3D models of the xenomorph and such, and recognizing that he's in full control of that medium as well is really
I mean,
impressive.
yeah, like when you watch that documentary that you shared with me, is you just realize like he's capable of executing his vision in any medium.
Yeah.
And it's not like he just was some head shop dude who had an airbrush and made t-shirts. No, he chose that as the tool to do that stuff. Yeah. And then I've also been, I mean, I was super into him for a long time. I know that he works like linearly across, like, so he'll do like top left corner all the way down to bottom.
Oh,
right.
really?
Yeah, it was really pretty interesting. It's not like,
never think that.
Yeah. I mean, there's some like broader sketching that happens, but like as far as the really heavy detail work, it would just be filled in. It's kind of interesting. His art objects are interesting too. You know, the Buckland Museum, our buddies at the Buckland Museum, they have a H.R. Giger sculpture, like an original one that was like, if I can remember correctly, I think it was at a Hell's Angels clubhouse or something like that. Wow. And they had like, I guess, bought an H.R. Giger statue. The guy from Korn, his whole mic stand was designed by him too. So I guess there's like some corny stuff stuff he's associated with.
Yeah, some of this stuff is hokey. It just is.
I mean, but it's weird too. Like you think about his album art for the Frankenchrist album.
Yeah.
You know,
although I think that already existed. I think that was
that before 79?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think that was made for Frankenchrist.
Oh, they used it for it. Yeah.
Whereas like Magma and Debbie Harry and ELP, I think those were commissions.
Yeah.
And apparently H.R. Giger was a delight to work with, which is nice to hear.
That's one of the things I think is really interesting when you watch the interviews where it'll kind of go back and forth between him and Ridley Scott. Is you have two extremely powerful creative brains, but they work together in a very like marketing kind of way. Like I think totally a result of Ridley Scott's background. I mean, that's how we develop stuff for like the dumb marketing stuff I work is you see some artist and you're like, man, that guy would be great. I wish we could work with that guy to do this. And if you had the budget for it, you do. If you don't, you just hand it over to some junior and hope it can pull something off similar and it doesn't look too much like the original.
And I think what you're describing also speaks to the way that filmmaking can be so collaborative, but it's difficult because it's so often based on the vision of one person, which is the director, and it's about that director fighting with everybody to get what they want.
Yeah.
But this movie seems to be one of its strengths is that Ridley Scott had a very, very clear vision, but was able to create a situation in which he could get out of everybody's way so that they can shine.
Yeah, but it's also not like he had a childhood connection to this story and always wanted to make it.
Yeah.
Like Channing Tatum and Gambit, you know, or like Ryan Reynolds and the Deadpool character. He just loved Deadpool and wanted to make that movie. I mean, he was hired to make this movie.
Right. He was not the first choice.
Yeah.
There were a lot of other directors in line first.
Yeah. It's interesting too, like how like Roger Corman turns it down so it can be a bigger movie. Like there's just weird little, that's the sort of Hollywood history stuff that I love is who, you know, for the 30 seconds that The Crow was going to be a musical with Michael Jackson. What if?
Yeah.
Or what's the other weird one was or the potential of Sandra Bernhardt to be Neo in The Matrix. Like,
what?
Yeah. Like just these characters that were like sort of in the talks, or Dave Chappelle was going to be in Clueless. Brief.
Oh,
they're not even
sorry,
attached.
yeah.
They're just like, you know, it's just a thing. Or like, you know, imagine Lisa Frank designing the xenomorph. You know, what would that look like?
That would be great.
I think that if I was going to do a sci-fi movie with a horror sci-fi element, obviously you have to have an alien that's a villain. You know, there has to be that. I think having it be very loud and psychedelic, like a deep sea fish, would be the cool move. Just to have an insanely bright color palette for whatever the threat was.
So kind of like the Reach trilogy. What's it? Oh.
The James Van Der Beek books.
Yeah,
What's
yes.
that guy's name? It's
Definitely,
James.
it's absolutely James Van Der Beek. That is 100% who it is. Southern Reach trilogy.
I mean, it's basically Color Out of Space.
Yeah.
But probably more biological.
Got it.
Yeah.
So like The Blob, but Technicolor.
I love the Blob as a horror character.
Both of them are
like
awesome.
Just a completely ununderstandable thing with a really horrific way of killing people.
Yep. Don't just build that wall.
Get away.
Don't let these aliens in.
Nope.
What have we learned?
Well, we have learned that standard operating procedures, especially concerning quarantine, should be followed.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what, the main thing. I think that while it would be lovely to listen to Ripley and middle management, it's the dudes in the engineering section that really knew what was going on, much like tech companies.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't look in wet eggs.
Nope.
A classic one. Don't trust androids.
Nope.
AI is bullshit.
Yep.
We've learned that. If you're looking for an alien, don't hang around wet chains.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot to learn from this film. What have you learned from Alien?
Nothing.
No. Well, as an emerging therapist, so this is actually kind of a semi-serious question. You are debriefing Ripley, and she's just experienced this situation. What would you tell her?
Am I a therapist or am I just debriefing? Okay.
You're a Weyland-Yutani therapist.
Okay.
And you've just hatched Ripley out of her thing. She's just told everybody what happened.
Okay. So my concern is her, right? So my primary concern is she's been through a traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
How do I help her get past that trauma as easily as possible, not take on and carry that trauma with her into the rest of her life? And I'm not a trauma specialist. I don't know EMDR. There are a lot of techniques for working with trauma very directly. And I think that something like EMDR could be very, very helpful. And if I could get to her soon enough, that would probably be the best thing.
So shock therapy?
EMDR is not shock therapy. Although, shock therapy is still around. It strangely has a utility. It is this point of, Scientology loves to bring up shock treatment as
the sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show,
as proof that psychotherapy and its history is all a big lie. But the thing is, it's been refined and actually has efficacy in certain domains in treatment. It's interesting. It's sort of like how, how we used to use leeches back when we were barbarians, but now actually if you have to graft a piece back onto your ear, there's something a leech does that draws blood and circulation back into that, then keeps it from necrotizing. It's kind of like that. It's like this awful, like if you just focus this thing from our past in a very specific way, it can actually be effective.
Man, when I was a little kid, I saw a news story about just this thing, the leeches.
Yeah.
A little girl got a finger cut off or something, put the finger back on, and she got it. But in the story, they let her take the leeches home as pets.
That's weird.
Holy fuck. I could not have been more jealous.
That's crazy.
Dude, like having a pet leech is like the coolest shit you could possibly have. It's a vampire. You have a pet vampire.
Completely.
Yeah.
So that's all I got for Ripley.
So not a xenotrauma specialist.
Well, okay. I mean, are we talking about me as I am today, or are we talking about...
you as a therapist, you just finished therapy school. You got Ripley. I mean, there's the other interesting thing is
do I work for Weyland?
Everyone works for Weyland-Yutani, so you work for Weyland-Yutani.
Right, but do they know about the xenomorphs? And so actually I am a xenotrauma specialist. Like, so that's actually a thing they've trained me for.
So as of the events of Aliens, they know it exists. Yeah. They want to go get it, but there's still some question if it actually happened. So that's a live question in it. Like, did you see what you saw?
Right.
I think it's kind of interesting. Like, somebody has something traumatic happen to them, but there's no proof of it. Like that.
Right. That is okay. So that would not be my concern. Mm-hmm. My concern is that the trauma is real.
Yeah.
Whether the source of it was fact or fiction actually doesn't concern me.
Yeah.
I wonder if I should just insert here that we just had a conversation about xenomorphs and psychotherapy, and it kind of wandered and got in the weeds. And so I'm just going to hard cut to this part.
Yep.
Might have been awkward to listen to, but here we are now. Anything else to say about this movie?
That's it. I mean, if we're doing the whole series, I'm sure we'll have much more to talk about. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, just
increasingly more to complain about because they get consistently worse.
There's a YouTube channel called Alien Theory that all they do is talk about this stuff. And I mean, they'll have like an hour on the Nostromo, like the design of it, you know. And this franchise, you could really, I mean, I guess we're going to, but you could go pretty deep into it. You know, just the individual people, like Dan O'Bannon is like such a weird
Return of the Living Dead
character.
Same guy.
Yeah, same dude. And like there are these figures in Hollywood of this time that were lived in different worlds, that they grew up in different worlds than the worlds they explored in film. Like Hal Needham is an example, the guy that directed Smokey and the Bandit. Like he grew up in one of those dirt on the floor hovels with like 8 brothers and sisters in the Appalachians or whatever, you know, like didn't have a TV, didn't have running water, didn't have electricity in the house that he grew up in. Dan O'Bannon's a similar dude. He grew up without television. And so he's sort of this character of the past. His wife talks about this, how he's like kind of out of time. He's out of past. And then he writes these completely psychedelic science fiction and horror ideas. And I mean, you could just talk about that dude for an hour.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those movies that I sort of thought I would never want to cover. And I think I said this about something like The Shining. It's been covered to death. Like there's so much has been said. I have nothing to add. But I think that even though, there are so many people throwing text against this movie, it's still fun to talk about.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It's a little bit like being like a record reviewer and you're going to cover Led Zeppelin 4. Like, what are you going to fucking say? There's like literally a book on your shelf over there about just that album, you know? And I mean, so of course.
Right. But then at some point you can go like, you know what? I kind of love talking about that album. So why not?
I mean, I feel like what we've done here in Alien is a little bit of what is done. We talked about we're almost like commenting on the secondary commentary, like, as part of what we've done. But I also feel like my whole thing about these are working stiff jabronis and she's middle management, I haven't really heard that talked about very much. Like how that character exists in sort of intergalactic, or not intergalactic, but like an interplanetary company. It's kind of, because I think probably that is what a future would look like. You know, there's not going to be one government that has enough money to mine asteroids or whatever, and the company that does eventually mine asteroids is going to be so fucking rich that it'll just walk away from other companies.
Maybe a really good spin-off part of this cinematic universe that would be great is like The Office set at Weyland-Yutani, right? Just office
I was
workers.
totally thinking about this. Like, what does it look like? You know, you're just the actuarial and you're looking at the report from Ripley and you're like, what? like, how do I even code this?
And then Parker's like, where's my shares?
And or like the word gets out, you know, and there's like, they try to be like, yes, one of our crews was murdered in space by an alien entity that may have been placed there by another alien entity that may have created our entire race and may have wanted to execute us because we executed one of them pretending to be our savior. But we have pizza. I don't know. I think it's just because I feel like at base as a human, I'm just like a working stiff, you know, just like I'm going to go into work and do something dumb that I don't care about and leave like most people will. But could you imagine, have you been following LinkedIn lately, how insane it's gotten?
No, what's up?
So if you listeners, if you want to be abreast of this thing, if you're not in the corporate world looking for a job right now, which is really tough, there's a page on Reddit called LinkedIn Lunatics. And it's just people like doing completely fucking batshit insane stuff, like trying to like prove how good of a worker they are. And one of the more famous ones, there's this guy who's like, I could have gone out and spent my company's money to get dinner on this work trip, but instead I went to the grocery store and bought a piece of chicken and I figured out how to cook it in my coffee pot in the hotel. And it's like the dude like is trying to say like what a company man he is, but instead he's probably just ruined some fucking coffee maker for everyone who ever comes after him, you know. But there's all this stuff like what my miscarriage told me about B2B SaaS marketing. Like there's all this totally insane shit. But you could imagine like Wayland Yutani like LinkedIn posts. Like, yes, my entire crew was murdered by a chitinous creature, but it really helped me lean in. Kind of makes me want to just like set up an Instagram page. It's just me cosplaying Wayland Yutani IT.
Or set up a LinkedIn page.
God,
as a company, just change the name of Wayland Yutani slightly enough that people get the joke.
I know. I never got it, but I always wanted that Wayland Yutani pride shirt. I just thought that shit was just fucking bonkers
that's great.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, I have a fondness for in-world apparel. So like if it's a thing that somebody wears in the show, like a Mouse Rat T-shirt or the Beef Chicago, from those shirts I love. And I have
what's Mouse Rat?
Mouse Rat is Andy Dwyer's band in Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I just like whatever, or like like the classic one you see a lot is a Dunder Mifflin shirt.
Yeah,
I just think that stuff is funny. I don't know. I guess I don't know when I became such a corporate bro.
Our listeners have been watching the whole progress.
Yeah. I think I probably was on that path well before we started.
Yes, you were.
I was trying to get into tech when we started the show. I was still at Whole Foods when we started the show.
Yeah. The one thing I'm noticing, I'm listening to back episodes lately, and I heard the episode where you're like, I think I'm going to get into resistance bands.
What does that even mean?
Like for training.
Oh, yeah.
It was right at the beginning of COVID. You're like, oh, resistance bands. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly where you went.
I was like bands that are like into Hillary Clinton? Is that what you meant? Yeah.
Resistance band training.
Oh, right. And now that's my whole deal.
50% of your personality. Well, thank you for sticking with us through two very long episodes of Scary Thoughts. We'll see you next time for Aliens, and if the goddess is willing, we're gonna do the whole franchise. This might be a terrible idea.
I feel like doing an extended dive into these films is gonna feel like a grind because of how unenjoyable some of them are to watch. But we're gonna have to do trickery, like we were talking about, like seeing if like Nick the Tooth from Infinite World would come on for Alien 4, which he likes for some weird reason.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it, whatever it is.
Ugh.
Thanks for listening.
I don't know, man. I don't know that we'll have the steam for it.
Get off your fucking phone.
Sorry,
what are you doing?
I'm trying to tell Tim that like I'm not going to make that movie.
Oh, okay.